Welcome back, my favorite gamers and developers. I'd like to introduce you to Masks, a new generation. This is one of my favorite games, and you get to play young superhero. The game does a really good job of mimicking the feel of these types of comics or TV shows. Try to think like Teen Titans, Young Justice, or Young Avengers. It's about these young superheroes who really still haven't found their place in the world and still don't know who they are or what they'll become. And the game mimics this by your stats being constantly flowing back and forth until you finally start finding that place that you belong in the world. You're also still really influential by adults or your friends, and that comes up quite often. And there's mechanical um, hindrances and benefits to being influenced. The game also doesn't deal with hit points, because really, what does damage matter when a train hits Superboy? Instead, the characters have to deal with and play out the type of emotional impact that being a young superhero puts on these teenagers. I've been playing this game for a few years now. I love it. So over the last month, I have been working on this rule set for Fantasy Grounds. Let's dive in and see what I did and how I did it. So before I began, I needed a good plan. And the tool that I use to plan out pretty much any of my applications is Figma. Figma is a site you can sign up for free, and it just basically gives you this white space to where you can draw applications. I I find it helpful because it when you build a box, it actually will tell you the pixel size and everything. And so planning it out here, it helps me get it pretty close to what it's going to look like when I get into Fantasy Grounds. When I first started, I made a template that has a lot of these objects from Fantasy Grounds, and then I copy that template over and I manipulate it for whatever I'm working on. I also created myself a little key. This is more actually for other people, but future me might forget what I was trying to do with something, to help me know about what does each one of these color codes that I have down there mean. So let's start with the character sheet. And I really wanted the labels because, like I described, the characters are still shifting in who they are in the world, and I really wanted to show that. This is actually on their playbook, and so I wanted to have little buttons. So I click the plus, and it'll move it this way, and it'll move it that way. Um, and it's constantly sliding back and forth, and I wanted to show that same aspect on the character sheet. I also want to have a spot for all the basic moves. These should be the same moves for every player. Then I wanted to have one because each playbook has their own special moves. Influence does have a major impact over the game, and I was kind of surprised that the actual playbooks don't really give you a lot of space for influence. So I wanted to be able to give that in Fantasy Grounds, so you can list in here uh, who, who, who do you have influence on and who has influence over you, and also give them a space to where they can actually type out why, because you might forget. The second page did not make it into version 1.0. There are ways for you to still track this information, but this will be an update that I make later in the line. And nothing else really changed to those other pages. On the character sheet at the bottom, though, I did want this available on all pages. So we're going to have the ongoing effects. And so characters, certain moves gives them effects that happen from round to round for them, or it could give them holds that they can use later, and I'll show you how that works. Conditions, uh, these are the damage that players take, the afraid, angry, guilty. And once you mark these off, you're going to get a -2 on some of your rolls. This is the detail that's going to show up on this window list, just like these details here. This one is what's going to show up in the moves list, and this one is what's going to show up in the influence list. This is the container for the ongoing effects, so I'll be able to hold the number of holds and ongoing, and then the description. This changed a little bit, but basically, uh, I have the combat tracker for the host and the client, and some of these things I changed when developing. This basically gives, like I said, this gives you a plan, it gives you an idea, but your end result might not end up being what you drew out. For the NPCs, NPCs, they can get moves. Now, granted, the GM doesn't roll at all during this game. However, there are certain moves that NPCs can get and take. A lot of these will be custom moves that you'll pass over to the player and they'll have to roll. Um, Take a powerful blow is a similar one in this game. Once that gets past to the player, they roll that, and it could actually take them out of the game, take them out of the fight. But there's a few different options on that. And then conditions, NPCs can have any number of conditions between 1 and 5 in the core rulebook, and in the additional rulebooks, it actually talks about allowing some big monsters to go even past that. Uh, the notes page is just pretty simplistic. And then the NPC condition container, some conditions actually have reaction moves, and so I wanted to give a place where you could list that for the NPC. You also have the moves container and the moves custom container. This actually became one container when I was done with it. I was originally going to split it out, but after working with it a little bit, I realized that it actually works as just one container. And so this looks just slightly different, but it has a lot of the same concepts. So let's jump over to Fantasy Grounds and see what the end result looked like. So here we are in Fantasy Grounds, and we have the combat tracker. Um, this is what the players will see for their combat tracker. The character sheets and the NPC sheets. So on the character sheets, when you click the arrows, it moves it up and down. This is where all the basic moves go. Now, I didn't feel right building in the basic moves into the rule set, so you will need to copy them out of the book into here. But I give you this moves container, which makes it really easy to do such. In here, you're going to list if the move is custom, if it has ongoings or holds. If it does, I will pop in the values down here so you can actually enter in how many ongoings or holds you get. If the move isn't rolled and you have an ongoing or a hold, you could do that. I also made the labels. If you double click the labels, it will check the box because I'm really bad at aiming. In here, you set which label it is that they'll roll, if they get a bonus or a hindrance, and if there's any conditions that work against them. And then you just bring in the description, what happens on a 10 plus, what happens on a 7 through 9, and what happens on a miss. If you leave miss blank, that's okay. We'll pop in some default text. Not every move actually has a miss, but some moves do. When you lock it, I hide the top pieces because those are just options that are being set when you're setting up the move. And then you're good to go, and you can throw this move off, share this move off with the players. Once they load them into their character sheets, it has it all filled out, and when they're ready to roll it, they'll just click this roll here. It'll throw the dice out. They got a 5, so they got a miss. They're going to be marking experience or marking a potential. And yeah, once you get 5 potential, then you advanced up. If you played the game, you should be familiar with this. They mark in who they have influence on and who has influence on them. And some moves gives you ongoing effects. For example, Pierce the Mask actually does give you an ongoing effect if I roll well enough, which this is about how good I roll during a game. I could do this. There we go. Nope, that was still a 6. Oh my god. So yeah, now you see Pierce the Mask shows up down in here, and it has 1 hold. And so like Pierce the Mask, I get to ask one question. What are they really planning? What do they want me to do? Basically, what is here? But let's say you're 20 rolls away from this because other things have been happening and you're like, oh, I still need to use my Pierce the Mask. I want to get some information out of this. You don't have to scroll back up. You can just look right in here at the description of what it is. And this will put in the description of what you actually rolled. And then once you use it, you can double click this to use it and it will remove it because you only had 1 roll or 1 hold. If you have an ongoing effect, I made these fake ones here, but let's say you have one that's you don't roll. And so you have an ongoing effect that goes in here. If the ongoing effect has a hold and you double click this, it will throw the +2 modifier down in here, but it will use one of your holds. And then when you use it again, it will still throw the +2 down in there and get rid of it. And then when you roll, it will actually add that modifier to it'll add that modifier to your roll. If you have an ongoing without a hold, it will stay forever. So you get the +2, and it doesn't kill it. It only will kill it if you actually have ones with a hold. Let's take a look at how I did some of that. Okay, so this is the character sheet main, and this is where I store my values for the labels over here. This is just the show, and all I'm doing here is I have these buttons, and these buttons will change this icon cycler. And so it will shift the labels back and forth. And then over here is where I'll actually store the values. So when I'm calling them, I call them from over here. This is a pretty standard window list setup. And let's look at what is actually in the move sheet. And so in my move sheet, I have my checkboxes here. The move custom is only visible by the GM, and the other ones are visible by the players, but when you lock it, it hides them. I have my label, my condition, my bonus, and then, yeah, I just places to fill out everything. When you roll it, this doesn't look like it does much, but all I'm doing is I'm grabbing the node of the character, the node of the link, and I'm sending it off to my move roll for prepare. And this is where a lot of the magic happens. So I'm gathering up all this data, and if I am not rolling, I'm just sending it off for the, because it has a hold on our ongoing. I go ahead and I just handle it all here. Otherwise, I prepare all this stuff for what roll is going to happen. I'm setting up my stats, so if it's calling for danger, freaks, savior, so on and so forth, I'm getting the right values into the stat. I'm setting everything up into this array. And then I send all of this over into my role manager. Now my role manager takes it in, and if it's an action or if it's a label, it will do two different types of rolls. So in here, if I pick up the dice and I just throw it, you can just pick up one dice and it'll throw the two, because that's how the game works. You always roll two dice. It will just basically do a simple, oh, you rolled and you got a 10. I had a modifier here. You rolled and got a 10, and so therefore it's a strong hit. So if I roll again, it's gonna just give me a 7 because I don't have the modifier down in there. Or if the GM asks you just roll your freak, you could just double click on the label and it'll roll that. In here, that would be just a label roll. If it's an action roll, basically if it's a roll from one of your moves, it will go into here, the pre-action roll and then the post-action roll. So the pre-action roll is just basically setting up everything. I'm looking at the modifier stack. I'm seeing if there's any stat mods from the move itself, or if there's any bonuses that are applied to the character. And it goes through all that and gathers up the data, figures out the dice plus modifier to roll. And then also we're setting up some descriptions. So if you have a move bonus, I want to make sure that shows up in the description. If you have something from the mod stack, I want that to show up in the description. Or if somebody's using a team point, I want that to show up. And then also a total output. Then, yeah, and then I send all that information over to the post-action roll. And down here is when it actually rolls. And I'm determining my value through here. And then in my results, I'm setting up the description, the message, if there's any ongoing or hold nums. And then if they're already ongoing or hold nums, I make sure to fill that out and throw that into the effects. And then of course display to the screen. When you do add a ongoing or a hold effect, so if I throw this into here, this will not only show up in here, but will also show up in here. And you can also see it in a explanation right here for that character. And you can also see their conditions that they have marked. So as you mark conditions, you can see which ones are marked for that character. So if you want to play out some of those aspects as the GM, it's a handy, quick way to look at it. So team is a pool in this game. And so let me pull up from the player point of view. They have access to use the team, and if you hover over it, it will tell you how to distribute team. So if you double click it, you could selfishly use team for yourself. And then when you roll, it will actually tell you here that you use your team selfishly. But you can also give it to other players. So if Atlas wants to give it to Bill, he can bring it up here, drop it on Bill, and you can see over here, Bill, that there's been a team point added to his character sheet, and it's down in here in this ongoing effects. And if you roll, it will go ahead and actually wipe out those team points and then use it right here, and it just says that they got a team point for that. So that's how you can share team points with one another. This is the combat tracker that the players see. There's no real turns in this game, so they don't really need to see the order, but what I did up here for ordering is if it's a player character, I pick a number between 11 and 20. If it's an NPC, I pick a number between 1 and 10. And I just randomly throw them up in there because a turn order doesn't really matter. Players just go when they go, and then you could check them off for when they finish their turn. Some NPCs, you might want to give them their own turn during a round. Some of them, they just react when the players go to attack. But if you have like this one NPC that's just kind of standing off and none of the players are attacking it, technically they never go. So that way you just actually say, oh, I realize this guy never actually went. Let me go ahead and do something with that NPC. Have them, I don't know, throw like a bus at a pedestrian, so the players will have to jump in the way and save the pedestrians. The players can also see the damage that is happening to the NPC that they're attacking. So as we mark off damage, they will show this chart going from small to large. There's actually, I think, 10 steps on this chart, so as the list gets bigger, the slower it will fill up. And then once everybody goes, the next round, I make sure to clear all of the checks so you can start over again. Looks like I need to clear some debugging. So let's look at how I built some of this. So here we have the combat tracker. And there was a little bit of thought that went into this. So I'm using the template from Ruleset Wizard, just with a few minor additions. So first I have an on drop. So that way if I'm dropping a team point into here or a shortcut, which I'll show you that in just a second, it'll do different things like sending a custom move or adding a team. The only change that I made in here was to the attack and defense, which I really should change out these icons, but it's not happening right now, is that I only want the attack to show for if it's a character and the defense to show if it's an NPC. So the attack is actually the ongoing effects. And in here, this is just a two-way window list. What I'm doing here is I create a handler to check if anything updates here or if anything updates on the character sheet. And then I'm going to send that information either from the character sheet into here if it's updated on the character sheet, or from here to the character sheet if it updates here. This way it keeps them in sync. And then, of course, on close, I remove those handlers. And there really wasn't that much to it. All I'm doing is if it updates on the character sheet, I want to stop the handler from updating here. And then I want to just go ahead and wipe out everything that I have here and copy over everything I have from the character sheet. And then I'll turn the handler back on. And then the opposite happens. If I update something here, it turns off the character sheet handler. And I wipe out everything on the character sheet. I add everything that I have from here back up to the character sheet, then I turn it back on. That was the quickest way I could figure out how to do it. You might have a better solution, and if so, please do a video and show us. For conditions, it's kind of the same thing. Actually, I just copied and pasted it over, and I'm using the same thing, except this only shows up for NPCs, and this is pulling from this list here on the NPCs, where the ongoing effects pulls from this list here on the players. So if I have 10 of these things here, it's going to show the 10 in here if you want to show those. Back on here, if I want to, if a character attacks me and I have a reaction move that I want to pass back to the character, if I take this and I drop it on, let's say, Atlas, This will pop up here, but it will also pop up on Atlas's screen. So they'll see the smackdown here, and they'll have this roll button. So they're going to roll their danger and with a condition of angry. And so this will roll, and it will take all those into account, give them what happens, and then the player has to play that out. The roll button does disappear immediately after it's been used. This is because I wipe out all that extra data that is allowing this to pull in the entire character sheet to figure that information out. And usually custom moves only happen once, and then that way the player can remove it and continue on. So I'm wrapping this up, and I will be sending this in to Fantasy Grounds hopefully tonight, and hopefully it'll show up real soon. I can't wait for you all to check it out. Please let me know what you think, and until next time, keep gaming and keep developing.